but for those who don't know what you're referring to, the Trump call, what does that mean?
So I was called by Trump in February. Emmanuel Macron had visited Trump, and I had done this series about, it was about his wife, Brigitte Macron. And the series got a lot of views, and Emmanuel Macron personally flew to DC and asked Trump to ask me to shut up, to just stop speaking about his wife. And I
know this was going to rise to the level of international incident.
No. And it's actually making me go back and thinking, you know, all the times we were told that a war ended because of this or because of that. This was one element of negotiation of Emmanuel Macron to Trump, and the topic of why he was, you know, ostensibly there was to discuss the end of the Ukrainian and Russian war. But you're taking Trump aside and you're asking him to shut up this podcaster in the US. I'm wondering if anything that we're told in our history books is real.
That is exactly right. I have wondered the same. That is just absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm. He is a viewer, him and his wife and their entire entourage. They watch every minute of my show. Trump certainly didn't. I know Trump, I think, stays much more in the mainstream media.
Yes.
In terms of watching what he watches. But
he must have been confused.
He sounded very confused. He said he was very confused when the leader of France took him
aside. Of a nuclear-armed country.
During negotiations for Ukraine and Russia to inquire about whether or not he knew Candace. And clearly it was an emergency, because it wasn't like Trump called me 2 days after or a week after. It wasn't like a side conversation that, oh, let's take care of that. I was messaged by the intermediary hours after Macron left, maybe even an hour after Macron had left, and said, like, we need to get on the phone with you.
The President of the United States.
Well, first, the person said, somebody very close to the President of the United States is asking me to ask you to stop talking about Brigitte's penis. And
this is the true face of diplomacy. I love it.
True face of diplomacy. And I laughed because I said, okay, no, bye. This seems ridiculous. I kind of questioned whether or not it was even true. But I liked the person who called me very much. And I thought maybe I was being a bit short there, because I'm 9 months pregnant, and I was at the time, I think 5 or 6 months pregnant, and I tend to get short the more pregnant I become. And so I called him back and I just said, can you explain to me what's really going on? And that individual told me that it was presented to him as a condition of ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. Like, this was something that he brought up in the midst of these negotiations. That's how it was presented to me from a third-party person. And then I was just completely floored. And I just took a second, looked to my husband, and the first thing we said to one another is, no one will ever believe us. This is beyond the realm of things that could be plausible. They're going to think I'm making this up and I'm lying. And even when I did eventually tell the story months later, people were like, there's no way that this could have happened. And until Trump didn't deny it. And then, of course, Emmanuel Macron is now suing me, and he included, as a part of the lawsuit, he referred to that phone call and how he believes that presenting it as an element of the Ukraine-Russian war was wrong. Like, he was like, and so he's nitpicking there. But
so what is he suing you over? What does the suit claim?
Well, it claims a lot. It's 200 pages.
200 pages.
200 pages. And what's really interesting is my series was based on a book. I worked with Xavier Poussard, who is a journalist, a very credible journalist in France, who worked on the story for 8 years and ended up having to move to Italy, move his family to Italy, because of what Brigitte and her husband, France is a whole different political system.
Certainly is.
And they can just bring charges
against you. It's an authoritarian country run completely by Macron, and they pretend that's not true, but it is true.
It is 1,000% true. And so journalists that first got wise to the fact that Brigitte Macron kind of didn't exist for 30 years of her life were harassed by the government. They filed charges against them for, first and foremost, invasion of privacy. So there was never a dispute when she was bringing these charges about. She never brought a charge against people for saying that she was born a man. And that's what should be made clear to everybody. Like, that's not something that they ever say is not true when it comes down to the legality of it all, when they get into courtrooms. But they first sued for invasion of privacy. Then they sued for defamation regarding a statement in error that the woman had made investigating when she said, in my opinion, this document is fake. But that document actually was real. It was a birth certificate relating to somebody in the story. And so it was remarkably petty. And this is what they do. They get very legalistic. We'll keep you in the courtroom. We'll harass you. And for Xavier, things were happening where they wanted him to know they were following him,
Yes.
and that the Secret Service was keeping an eye on him. They never actually brought a suit against him until recently, the same time as mine. They're not suing him for defamation, even though he's the author of the book that I based my entire series on. They are instead suing him for cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying ahead of state?
Mm-hmm. You can do
I
that in
should
Europe.
just say, because it's true, that the intelligence services, everyone makes fun of France as incompetent and weak, but their intel services are not incompetent or weak. And after probably CIA, Mossad, maybe the Russian intel services, like, they are feared.
Mm-hmm. And they should be feared.
They are feared. They are feared. But they're very competent. They're violent. Documented they've killed people, and they're nothing to play with, really.
Right. That's why he picked up his family and he moved.
I get it.
And so it was this tremendous act of bravery that he did this, putting not just his life on the line, but the life of his wife and his children, because the story here was so demented and so twisted. And just also the broader consideration that you could have an entire state colluding to protect a secret of that magnitude. And what's so compelling about this story, and I get into this in the first episode of Becoming Brigitte, is that by the time it made its way to the English-speaking world, people thought that this was like a, as always, far-right conspiracy dug up from the trenches of Reddit. And that's not what happened at all. The story begins with Emmanuel Macron and his wife is actually the journalists, the left-leaning journalists, the Condé Nast journalists, who wanted to celebrate Brigitte,
yes.
wanted to do documentaries on Brigitte. This wonderful woman is now empowered, and what is she going to do? And they were kind of getting threatened. They were told to come to the Élysée Palace, and there was only one person that they could talk to. They couldn't find or verify anything about Brigitte's history or Brigitte's past, and they sort of fell down the hole and were like, I don't know why I suddenly feel like I've done something wrong for asking basic questions about the First Lady of France. And so that's kind of where the series begins, and it kind of takes you through what they went through and what many people have gone through since, just trying to learn anything about the First Lady.
So to be clear, it's an amazing story, and for so many reasons, but for the one that you just described, that this was actually well known in France. It all took place in public, but I don't think 1 in a million Americans had any idea at all until your series came out, and the initial reaction to your series was, well, that now we know Candace is insane. Like, really going off the deep end. Wife's a man, come on now. And then as the series progressed and became one of the biggest podcast series in the country, and sort of sober people were saying, actually, you should listen to this. This is pretty wild, pretty compelling. But I just want to get to the lawsuit. So, like, they're suing you for defamation.
For things that I never said, which is
Right.
they know that this lawsuit, this is why I called it a PR strategy. This lawsuit was filed for the press, right? Because she just lost her defamation case against 2 journalists in France, and now everyone was reporting, wait, you said that this was the big case that proved, or you presented it as if you were suing them on this claim of you being a man or a woman, and now you've lost that in France. This is your home territory. What's going on? And so I think she called the lawyers and were like, just file a lawsuit, because it's very sloppy. The points run into one another. Like, first they argue that I'm doing it for money, then they make the argument that I was fired for speaking about it. So that doesn't make any sense. It can't be both. And it's a bunch of stuff that I didn't say. They're behaving like mainstream journalists, where they'll take a couple of words that I said, like gangster, criminal, and gangster, but then they add their own sentence to it. And they're like, she accused her of being a criminal and a gangster. So it's very sloppy. And what they're doing is they're just biding their time. They don't want the world to look, which this was a very bad mistake, a very bad way to go about it, but they want the world to believe that she has a claim against me, that we're suing, therefore, because this podcaster lied. But it's way too late. I mean, it's everyone is aware of what's happened. This only made the series go viral. Now it's going viral in Asia. I'm getting all of these emails from people in China saying this series is going viral. They're not even on YouTube, so I don't know how they're watching it in China. But it was a mistake, because obviously now people are going, okay, something must be true. A president of a foreign country does not sue a mom that does her podcast in her basement because she's spoke something that was not true. Like there's clearly something that they want hidden, and so everyone's taking a closer look at the series.
Yeah, that's not the way to hide things.
Right.
The way to hide things is say, poor Candace, nice woman, obviously mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, come on now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to do it, and sophisticated liars do that.
Right.
So it is interesting. They're responding in a way that clearly is driven by emotion,
right,
fear. I mean, that's my read. I don't really know why they're responding, of course, but looking at it is it's so interesting. You may have noticed this is a great country with bad food. Our food supply is rotten. It didn't used to be this way. Take chips, for example.
thinking that America is the same sort of abuse as France is, and that while we have said that you can't ask us any questions, we'll sue you for cyberbullying. There is something cyberbullying, whatever the claims are here, but there is something about it where once you really arrive at a truth, what I find the reaction is for the people that are incensed by the fact that you're presenting that truth is I'll impoverish you.
Yeah.
And I've seen this over and over again. It's like, okay, she told the truth, but our response to that is going to be demands that she get fired, right? She should lose her livelihood for speaking the truth. She should lose, and that's why Jake Tapper, I don't know if you've seen it, you probably haven't because it's Jake Tapper, but he sits down with Tom Clare, who is a lawyer on this case, and Jake Tapper is doing the absolute most to make this just the easiest interview for Tom Clare. He's sitting across from him, and he's like, she's deranged, and she's crazy, and she's a conspiracy theorist. So much so,
Jake Tapper said that.
Jake Tapper, but so much so that people in the comments were like, "Now I want to watch the series." His own viewers thought this was just so over the top. But then he turns to Tom Clare and he asks him like a basic question. He's like, what evidence did you present to her that Brigitte's a man? And Tom Clare can't answer the question. He's like, there was you can read the claims. It's extensive, and we told her that she was a woman. They never presented any evidence. We went to them before we published the series. We were in touch with Tom Clare, Clare and Locke. We sent them a list of questions. We said, look, we won't even do the series if you answer these basic circle yes or no questions. Was Brigitte Macron, the first lady, born a woman? That basic of questions. Did she ever live as a person named Veronique before the transition? Temporarily, Brigitte lived as a person named Veronique. They refused to answer these yes or no questions. Obviously, if you're going to prove actual malice, you have to present to the court, which is it's obviously a very high bar that's been set, which I don't necessarily even agree with that bar, by the way. New York Times versus Sullivan set. But obviously, you have to prove that I acted. I knew the truth, and I acted.
That's exactly right.
I was desperate to get to the truth and said I would stop doing this series. We also offered for me to get on a plane and fly to France to interview, to get Brigitte's side of this. I want to make sure I'm not colored by having read Becoming Brigitte and reading the series. There could be another side. And it was essentially a big you and said, Tom Clare comes back. She doesn't have to answer your question. She that doesn't have to prove to you.
So
okay.
They retained Tom Clare and Libby Locke then, or Tom Clare. So Tom Clare and Libby Locke are married, second marriage for him. But I know them, and they have a law firm, I believe, in suburban DC and Virginia, and that specializes in making people shut up through intimidation. They tried it with me, and in a really brutal, cruel way, I would say, to try and just scare you into shutting up. So that itself, I don't think anyone regards Tom Clare as a good lawyer at all. But certainly, his behavior is designed to intimidate you. So the fact that they hired them at the outset, that's the behavior of someone who just like wants to scare you into shutting up.
And the timing of when they first sent us a letter was actually December of last year. Sorry, the end of November of last year. We missed the letter because they sent it to a inbox that we would have never been checking. It was a very weird inbox, like where you would go to return a T-shirt. And because we missed that, and I'm glad I missed it because I probably would have been scared. I think they knew because that was right when I began speaking with Xavier Coussard. And I was in London at the time, and I had agreed to interview him, but nobody knew I was going to do this interview. So what made them suddenly send this intimidating letter?
And Tom Clare sent it?
Tom Clare sent it.
They'd already retained him.
They had retained him, and he sent the letter, and I think that they were monitoring Xavier Coussard. I think they were monitoring either his communications or monitoring him.
Would they have known?
That he was flying to London to sit down and do an interview with me, and they sent it just a week before I sat down with him.
Well, keep in mind the subject of your story controls some of the most competent intel services in the world.
Correct.
As a head of state, there are no rules at all, which is enough to make you a little uncomfortable if you think about it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they would hire those two lawyers, by the way, his wife, Libby Locke, is Bill Ackman's lawyer, who Ackman uses to make people shut up.
Interesting.
By sending hysterical letters, screechy letters, threatening to destroy you if you keep talking about the client. I mean, it's really thuggish. Let's just go through, but can we just go through like chronologically how this unfolded? So at the core of the story is the allegation that Brigitte Macron is not who she says she is, and that would include her sex, is not what she says it is.
Correct. That she was born a man named Jean-Michel Trogneau. And I'm aware, if you have not watched the series, that sounds crazy because that was me when I first saw the headline.
Yes, no. I mean,
I was alerted to it by the Daily Mail. I thought it was such a crazy, insane headline, but it was the Daily Mail had done this, had published an article saying that with a video of Emmanuel Macron denying claims his wife was a man. And I just thought that's really funny. Like, what could possibly be going on in France that has to deny a claim that his wife's a man? But something that caught my eye was just, as I was reading this article, they made no effort to debunk it. Like, it was sort of like, it was that typical CNN, New York Times, it's so crazy. It's like, okay, but if it's so crazy, just, post some photos of her. Obviously, she's got 3 kids. There's got to be tons of photos of her raising her children. There's nothing. They had one solitary photo. And when you look at the photo, it was very obvious, and this is before I got into the details, that she looks a lot more like the little boy that's on the left than she does who they were trying to purport was the little girl that was sitting on the family member's lap. And so I got into it kind of very organically. I was like, this is weird. Like, what's going on in France that the president has to make a comment on this situation? And then I found a website where it explained it, and I instantly realized there is something here. Like, you don't have any photos of yourself for 30 years of your life, and the 2 photos that you've given have been given to the public from a woman who has quite literally been charged with documents. She's a thug. Mimi Marchand, they had to eventually get rid of her. Forging documents, thuggery, things of that nature, of a criminal nature. She's the only one. Everyone's going to go through her to get any information about your past. This is so strange. It's so kooky that you wouldn't just, the defense to this is just, hey, could you show us any pictures of your living for these 30 years? You had allegedly 3 children. Did you guys take any photos while you were raising them? Maybe when you were in the hospital? No, Tucker. There's nothing there.
So it's an amazing allegation, a stunning allegation, a bewildering allegation. But I think the legal and the moral question is, did you give the prime minister and his wife an opportunity, the Macrons, the opportunity to respond to the allegation before the series ran? So that's my question.
Weeks.
In what way did you do that? Did you call them? Did you?
Via Tom Clare, was their lawyer. So it actually, they kind of made a mistake. They messaged us first to kind of intimidate us and say, you're working on this thing, or
Did they say how they knew you were working on it?
I am not clear, because what was interesting is in that first letter, they included claims of what I said while I was working at the Daily Wire. That was the previous March. So you're responding to something that I said in March. We're now in December. So what triggered you? Like, clearly it had to have been that I had just interviewed Xavier Coussard, and they were aware of it. So then they said, okay, send her out a letter to intimidate her. And obviously getting a letter from most people, you get a letter from a sitting president of France, you're going to go, okay, well, I'm just going to be quiet. and not say anything more because I don't want to get involved in this. But for me, it just made me even more curious. And so, to be sure, I said, well, I'm glad we have a line of communication established because I'm certainly not interested in defaming you. I'm not interested in lying. Obviously, I would do myself a disservice if all of this was complete crap. And it turned out that I had been peddling it. So here are my questions, very simple, yes or no questions. Did you ever live as Veronique? Who is Jean-Michel Trogneau? Refused, or they just instantly got.
So you presented the allegations to them, which they of course were aware of, people had made, others, not you, that she's not really who she says she is. And you said, can you explain?
Yeah, and honestly, didn't require much of an explanation. We also asked, can you give us any photos of you living through this 3-year period? I mean, pretty easy stuff. If you're actually concerned and you're going to pretend you're so traumatized and defamed because of the story, I would have been like, yeah, of course, here I am. Here's me in middle school. Here's me on a cheerleading team. Here's me the first day I held my first son. Here's me. It's such an easy thing to debunk that it requires the suspension of common sense to believe that this is a conspiracy theory, because it's so easy to debunk, and yet they refuse to do it, and they're extremely petty and going after every single person that speaks about it. Now,
have they ever provided that evidence to anybody?
No, that's the point. They can then come out and say, this person is a psychopath. Clearly, here is the trove of me growing up with my sisters. Here's my middle school yearbook. To the contrary, even when Xavier Poussard, because he has worked on this for 10 years and therefore filing paperwork with the government to get pictures, Jean-Michel Trogneau has a military file. He also filed to get Brigitte's school yearbook, where she's allegedly has a picture, and he won that case and then took it to Sacre-Coeur, which is Sacred Heart, and they said, we're not releasing it. I don't care if you won the case. We're refusing to release this to you. So in every regard, something that would be able to dispel this rumor, even her children, where are your kids in this? If that's my mom and she's so attacked and it's so horrifying that she's got to put, my dad, stepdad on a plane to go speak to the president of the United States, way before then, I would have released pictures of me and my mom. Her kids are all adults. I would have said, here's me and my mom growing up on my first birthday, my second birthday. Please, everyone, leave her alone. They won't do it. It's bonkers.
Have the kids spoken in public?
Only one child has ever spoken and called the rumors crazy and upsetting, and that's her youngest daughter, Tefan. And I have a theory about why that is, but again, there's no evidence to supply. Tefan won't go under oath. Tefan won't speak. Tefan won't say, "Oh no, this is." She just says it's very hurtful and it's not true. And okay, Tefan, will you have the power to dispel this? Releasing some photos of you growing up. You're a 40-year-old lawyer. It's pretty simple to release some photos of you as a kid with your mom, and they won't do it.
Here's a revealing and unpleasant fact. Mexico is facing a dangerous outbreak of
This is good stuff. Greetings and welcome back to the channel. If for the first time coming across my channel, please remember to subscribe. Um, this story here, I've come across it, and I wanted to bring it to you. But because it's not live, I have to do it in a special way. So bear with me while I chop and change, chop and change. But remember to like and subscribe and stay tuned. We're gonna go back and join them in a minute. Let's go back.
Go forward.
No,
They're not planning on a courtroom showdown here.
no. And there's no way. By the way, I engaged with Libby Locke and Tom Clare a long time ago about defamation, and they told me not to go after it because the bar was so high. And I had a very clear case where someone told a blatant lie about me, which we happily countered right away.
You've dealt with them before.
Yeah. Oh, I have emails from. This is the funny part. I have emails from them. I love you, adore you, watch your show.
They're
and
totally soulless, both of them.
yeah, clearly.
Yes.
The motive here is money, which is fine if that's what you want your legacy to be, because at the core of this case, which most people should be speaking about, is their defense here is I am admitting, which they've never done before, and they are admitting that Emmanuel Macron was only 14 when they met, when he was in that play. 15, she says, whenever this affair happened. And in my suit, they admit that Emmanuel Macron's parents took him away from the school because of this relationship. Do you understand how the audacity of, I'm a creep, I macked on a student at best, and I had the audacity to file this lawsuit? I mean, what is going on in France that you would so willfully put that in a lawsuit, which, by the way, debunks their earlier claims. When he was first running, the press said he was 17. Then, when Xavier Poussard proved that it wasn't true, then suddenly we're saying he was 16. Now we've got them writing that he was 15. But the truth is that Emmanuel Macron was 14, and they can't go back on that truth because she has.
Isn't that child molestation?
There we go. That's another big thing happening here. She's desperate now to keep it at 15. Brigitte wants to keep it at 15. No, he was 14 in that play that she says that she watched him in. As you know, 14-year-old boys, I guess as a 40-year-old woman, you would just be so swept away by a 14-year-old child on stage. He was in this play. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a French name. La Kundera's play. And that's when she alleges that she saw him, and he just was ahead of his time, a savant, so brilliant in his demonstration, his ability to act.
He's a little kid.
He's a child. He's a child, and this is a very creepy, sadistic story. And the more that you learn how much the press lied about that earlier story, I mean, even the press in the beginning, when he was running, even said that Brigitte Macron was this like irresistibly hot teacher. Like they kept comparing Claudia Schiffer. And then when Xavier and these journalists got documents and like, you know, pictorial evidence of what Brigitte looked like at that time, she looked like a man in the middle of a transition, you know. And so even that, I mean, the way the press lied to sell this creepy relationship is something that should concern everyone, whether you believe she's a man or not. What you have is a couple that is willfully getting away with, at best, like molestation, a sexual perversion, deviance, and he runs the country.
This is not some random guy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's not in dispute.
No, that's not. It was in dispute because they tried to at first say that he was 17. Now she's saying 15. The truth is, Emmanuel Macron was 14.
I'll just go with 15 and say that's wrong.
Yeah, because, right? Like, do we even need to?
Well, I mean, yeah. 15. I mean, that's a whole different thing.
And that was the comments under Jake Tapper's interview with Tom Clare. People, and this is the left, this is his show, were outraged. They were going, "How could you defend this?" I asked a question to Tom Clare on my show as I unpacked all of the child molestation that surrounds them. It's an entire orbit of people who have been found guilty and have openly admitted to molesting their children. These are their friends, okay? That's why she's angry, because I'm like, it's not just them. It's this guy, this guy, this guy. He funded the campaign, then had to come out and say, yes, I molested my stepson, and the stepdaughter wrote a book about it. A person admitted to that. And
these are friends of the Macrons?
Oh, yeah, their current lawyer, okay, who was the finance minister. Brigitte handpicked him to be the finance minister of France. His name is Eric Dupont-Moretti. This was my episode 2 days ago. Of course, because everyone in their orbit just, I don't know, interesting pedophilia story.
Do you have any friends who are pedophiles?
None. They just can't stop finding friends that are somehow involved in these crazy pedophilia scandals. And Eric Tapon Moretti made a name for himself as the lawyer that comes in on behalf of the offending. In this case, it's almost always incest, by the way, in all the cases that he involves himself in. And he convinces the court, as he did in one certain case called the Manouche affair, that, okay, yeah, it is incest. Yeah, he's been raping his daughter, but, and this is what he's famous for, it's happy incest. And he sold to a court and got this guy sentence reduced. He had been raping 2 of his daughters.
Come on.
I'm not kidding. You can look this up on Wikipedia, no less. And he sold this to the court, coined the phrase along with another person who, another lawyer who Emmanuel awarded the Medal of Freedom to. And they said to the court in Amiens, which is where Brigitte and Emmanuel are both born, that you should release this guy because he loves his daughter. And now she's 21. And so it doesn't really matter. And honestly, it's the mom's fault. They encouraged them to all sleep together. And so they did. They released him early. And then his tried to escape him. And he killed her. So this is who everyone, this is the guy who's on the news channels right now saying, we're going to go after Candace Owens because this is a state affair. And he's got this whole glorious story about how I'm being funded by Russia. Because it's always Russia, as we all know. It's got to be Russia.
Funded by Russia?
His theory was
This
so...
feels like the kind of end stage of something.
Yep.
I hate the phrase global elite because it sounds so spooky or whatever, but that's what it is.
The depraved. I don't even call them the elite. They're the depraved, and they've just been running the game for so long that they're not even getting creative anymore.
But there's always a part of town with depraved people. Like there, every society has the depraved community. But has there been since Rome really a whole class of depraved people with this power? That's what gets.
I think so. Yeah. The more that I study and the more that I take a look at this picture, because at first, you go through this period where you're going, am I crazy, or are they all defending like children being raped? Like this can't be right. Like somebody's going to stand up and say something. And the only thing that you can do in those moments where you're questioning whether or not this could be circumstance is to educate yourself further.
Yes.
And I find that whatever area they have sort of an inordinate response to, where they're like getting very angry about something that seems so simple, is probably where you should press your thumb the hardest. And I did this with like Sigmund Freud. I kind of said something on my show about how like Sigmund Freud was like a pervert and getting into children incest, his whole theory, blaming the children for their parents being incestuous, and the reaction across the press, like how dare she? I'm like, he's dead. Why are you defending this guy?
Not American.
Did present a theory that these children who were being raped by by their fathers were actually attracted to them. Why are you defending this? And then I got educated about it and started reading books and stunned. Like, yes, this is actually something that he was doing. And I learned this from the person who controlled the Sigmund Freud archives, who wrote this amazing book called The Assault on Truth. But there is this common thread that it brings you back to Paris every time, whether you're talking about Epstein, Maxwell, talking about Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte, talking about Sigmund Freud. He studied and then came up with this theory while he was studying under Charcot in Paris, that actually, even though we see all this evidence that these kids are being raped, it is their fault because they're attracted to their fathers. And for this guy who rang the alarm on this, like years later, who's working with Anna Freud, and he was in control of the archives, his name is Jeffrey Masson, he got kicked out of the archives for telling the truth.
Very, very famous case.
Oh yeah, he got kicked out. But he wrote the book still because he still had the letters. He published the letters to prove that Sigmund Freud knew for a fact these kids were being raped. And
Boy,
so
was
what
he attacked. Boy, was he attacked for that too.
But here's what's interesting about that. He publishes that book, The Assault on Truth, and Anna allowed him to, because she could have stopped the book, and Anna Freud chose not to stop the book. I think she wanted the secret to be out. But you go through these stories, and over again, you get this theme of this very dark theme of children that are being raped, right? And it's incestuous. And like I said, while they're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, like, why do we keep coming back to this theme? And why does it seem that the media is colluding to cover that up? Like, I thought no matter where we were on the spectrum, left or right, like when it came to children, whether it's murder, rape, like we all were on the same page that like we have to defend innocent lives. And so then you have to press further and go, what is the theology here? Because everything, as my husband has taught me, is a theology. They're being guided by a theology. And while the rest of the world is being driven towards either being agnostic or being outwardly atheistic, I think the people that are in control are being pulled by.
Well, they're not atheists.
They're not atheists at all.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting. One of my smarter children said to me today, actually, said child molestation is the only crime with no justification. And I had never thought of it that way. And it's like murder, of course, murder's wrong. Of course, there's plenty of circumstances where I can imagine committing murder, going to hell for it. But I mean, I can imagine, getting so mad that I shoot somebody, or you know what I mean? Stealing, lying. But it's not possible to imagine a justification for molesting a child, for being sexual with a child. And it's also not possible to imagine for all the sins that I can imagine committing in a certain circumstance. Like, that's just, I can't even get my head around it. That's just not appealing in any way. Like, you'd never even think of wanting to do that. So it's got to be spiritual. You don't want to be passive and tired and dependent, do you? Of course you don't. You want to be strong and self-sufficient.
Appreciate you for still watching and still staying here with us. I switched the screen because I don't want to be copyrighted. But I'm asking you for two things. Number one is to like the thing. Number two is to subscribe. Let's go back and join.
I'm curious. If they would just leave me alone, I promised I wouldn't even have come down this path. But what you learn about Sigmund Freud is that what he actually mainstreamed. I mean, the psychoanalytic movement was quite literally a movement to mainstream gaslighting. And this is no question. Like I said, you can read Sigmund Freud's archives. This guy was not a guy theorizing that this is what was going on. He had access, learned German, read the archives, alerted Anna Freud, and was like, hey, did you know your dad knew that these kids were being raped and yet he lied to the public? And she's like, yeah, I think, we maybe don't publish that. But then she let him publish it. And I think that was a cry for help, but that's my theory. Anyways, the second book to read was, once you get to that and you go, what is this guiding theology? Why did Sigmund Freud at first acknowledge, as he did, openly, that all of these kids were being raped? Because he was at the morgue. Some of these kids were dying because of their injuries. And he was at the morgue in Paris. He saw this up front. There was no dispute. The literature has been published. He's studying under Charcot, and then he does this pivot suddenly when he turns 35, and he says, "Never mind. These kids are not being abused. They're attracted to their fathers.
They're the sexual provocateurs."
David Bacon published a book, and he relates it to, and he makes a very sound argument, and then this theory that it's called Sigmund Freud and the Jewish mystical tradition. And he relates it to the Kabbalah, this sort of Gnostic idea that you have to descend into hell and then you'll be brought up. And like the worst thing that you could possibly do, the worst sin, they believe in this idea of holy sin, is to harm a child. Now, again, these people that I'm citing, just because I know that you start talking about Sigmund Freud and anti-Semitism, these people who wrote these books are both Jewish. Jeffrey Masson is Jewish, Ashkenazi Jew. David Bacon is an Ashkenazi Jew. These people are professors and they have the credentials here to make these conclusions. And what he theorizes in this book is that Sigmund Freud was mainstreaming the Kabbalah through psychoanalytics. And the reason why he waited until he was 35, as he explains, is that in the Kabbalah tradition, they think it's so powerful, whatever the Kabbalah is. And I'm not educated on the Kabbalah, I will admit that. But whatever it is, they don't tell their kids about it until they turn 35. And when Sigmund Freud was 35, he received a Hebrew Bible from his father. And it's like, I guess they believe in numerology, whatever. And he was suddenly awakened to whatever aspect of the Kabbalah that it was. After David Bacon published the book, a rabbi came to him. He got in touch with the rabbi and spoke to this rabbi, who told him that, yes, Sigmund Freud was a Kabbalist. He knew him personally. And he had a Zohar in his apartment or in his place, and he then verified that his theory, as reading through his papers, was correct, and that he was a Kabbalist. And so I think it's important for people, as I started a book club, to read these books. Like, don't take it from me. And I always say, yeah, we need to stop falling for this credentialism. You shouldn't listen to me because I'm Candace Owens, I have a podcast. I want you to read these same books and to recognize that something very wrong is happening in this world. And when we point to these facts, we're all being gaslit. Like we're suddenly being told that having a response, that's just one example to right now, to like kids dying in Gaza makes us monsters. Well, Sigmund Freud is the person that introduced the idea of sort of this, that gaslighting could be an effective strategy.
And gaslighting, as I understand it, is the process of inverting blame.
Mm-hmm.
So I punch you in the face and attack you for assaulting me.
Mm-hmm.
How dare you hit me?
Right.
And
it feels like we're constantly being gaslit.
Well, it does feel like there's an awful lot of blame shifting. I see it in a very different context, which is on economics. It's like, you know, the working class in the United States has been like completely under assault. It's not accidental. They were kind of targeted for extinction and treated with maximum contempt, and then they're like blamed for their medieval attitudes or all racist or whatever. It's like, no, actually, I think they're the ones who aren't winning. They seem to be losing out in a deal that is making a lot of other people rich. Why are we attacking them?
Well, then you get called a racist, right? You get called a racist for noticing that. And these people who are like, I just want to be able to feed my families and go to work and feel good about that.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with race. Like, how did race become part of this? It's like, what?
But that's an element of that. And one of the things to recognize about Freud is that, so the Freud family creates a psychoanalytic movement, Sigmund Freud does, and they're gaslighting people, but then that turns into modern propaganda because that's the Freud Bernays family. It's the same family. Edward Bernays is the person that did propaganda during World War II, the OSS. Like, they were using him to figure out how can we mainstream, like how can we convince an entire population to want to go to war, you know, to hate Germans. This is the guy that they brought in. So it's the same, like the psychoanalytic movement then turns into propaganda with Edward Bernays and then turns into PR. Like the biggest PR person in the world right now is still the Freud family. The Freud family are the PR for the royals. His name is Matthew Freud. So you can draw a direct line in understanding that
I think Matthew Freud was married to Rupert Murdoch's daughter.
That is true. That is correct. Mm-hmm. And so it's very interesting to... Yeah, and it's important for people to recognize this, though. These people have had a tremendous head, okay? They know how the mind works. They have run these experiments on people. They have had this relationship with the state forever. In fact, I think they are the state, if I'm being honest. They are the state. I shouldn't even say it's a relationship with the state. And what they are constantly trying to do is to infect your mind. Okay, so picture you being that, you know, child who lived this horrific experience, and now you have an adult sitting before you and saying that never happened, and you're crazy, and what's wrong with you is that you're like attracted to your dad. That's what they're doing to all of us in a certain way. Obviously, way more devastating when it happens to a child in that regard, in that sinister regard. But when you see the mainstream media apparatus today, and they're gaslighting us. Like the case of Brigitte Macron is the most gaslighting I've ever seen in my life, where it's just like, you could debunk this in 1 second, but you won't. And you're calling us deranged, and you're calling us crazy, and you're calling us anti-Semitic for caring about a dead Palestinian kid. And it's like, this is, yeah, they created this system. And the only way that we're going to be able to defeat it is we have to first understand it. And that's why I really encourage people to get educated. And I just made it my point because I constantly kept getting this claim, like anti-Semitic, talk about Sigmund Freud. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm only going to read Israeli historians and I'm only going to read Jewish books that are written by Jewish authors, so that we can just go ahead and dispel the rumor.
I've never heard that. It's interesting. Sigmund Freud has gone in and out of style. Well, he was very in style when I was young, and then
same for me, he was very in style.
Yes, and then he was really knocked off the pedestal by feminists, as I recall, because he had like some non-fashionable views on women and calling them hysterical, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't recall Sigmund Freud being like a protected figure. Since when is criticizing him a hate crime?
That's what was so weird to me. I did one episode on the Daily
I don't think he was a religious guy, at least.
Exactly. I did one episode, and I was speaking about also all of his friends. His best friend was this guy, Wilhelm Fliess, who his son came out, Robert Fliess, and said, my father sexually assaulted me. Everyone surrounding him was sexually assaulting their children in Vienna, which is...
Again, what is that? I mean, I feel like I've been everywhere, know a ton of people. I've never met anyone who's been accused of molesting his own child. That is so far out. I've known people who've done every bad thing, and I've never met anybody who's even been accused of that. Yeah. And yet you're describing two clusters of people, powerful people, famous people, where like tons of people in the orbit had been accused of or have in fact committed child molestation.
Well, let me just tell you, as
What
you get
the
into
hell?
my series, like as I point to all this orbit around them of everyone who just keeps accidentally committing pedophilia, defending pedophilia, whatever it is. The best part is for me that they kind of laugh in your face. That they want you to know that there's an element of it that's partially sadistic. Presidential portrait, Emmanuel Macron leaning against a desk. Everybody has to do this, leaning against a desk. Obviously, the official presidential portrait.
Yes.
He chooses to put a book, and he has in multiple interviews said it's his favorite author, by Andre Gide on the table. Andre Gide is an author who admitted openly that he was a pedophile. He's a pederast. He specifically only actually molests little boys, and he would go down to Algeria, Morocco, and he'd write books based on his experiences. The president of France chose to put that book, okay, an Andre Gide book, on his desk for his official presidential portrait. Like there was no other book that you could have picked to put there. There's an element of it where I think that they've amassed so much power. And it's quite interesting because I think maybe Daryl Cooper told you about this, but getting into Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr,
Yes.
who wrote that weird book,
Yes.
the space, it's called Space something, Space Relations by Donald
Yeah.
Barr, where he predicts a colony of Khazars, as he calls them, Khazars, Kossars, he spells it, that are so bored with their power. They're so bored with being elite, just getting away with everything, you know? And he then predicts kind of in this fantasy book, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's very strange. Got it. And he also was, in the OSS, which was the precursor for the CIA. But there's an element of that when I see Emmanuel Macron engaging in that it's like they want to get caught and they just have so much power. They know there's never going to be any consequences for it, where you go, why would you do this? You could have put any other book on your desk. You could have put literally any other book on your desk, but you chose a self-admitted, never denied the fact that he would go down to Morocco and he was into little boys.
So we're in the nicotine business. We make Alp pouches and they're delicious. But one thing about nicotine, it is rated by the federal government up one side and down.
Just wanted to show you that. Want me to show you another? Yeah. I'll show you another one. Yeah. But you haven't seen that one before. Let's see what they say in the new cover. I'll show you some more.
You can at first file to dismiss the case because you're going, hi, we have the First Amendment right. This is crazy. It's coming from Paris. I mean, like, why on earth would we honor this at all? Secondly, it's like, are we really going to allow the French president to come in here and like stifle my right to speech? And typically in a normal scenario, a judge would dismiss this case because it's completely crazy. And we can obviously then produce the evidence that we asked them these questions and they chose not to reply to them for whatever reason. I think they want us to dismiss it. And again, I'm guessing just so they can say, oh, well, we tried. But, America has its own beast. They have actual malice. Or they are going to pretend that Brigitte died from grief. I don't know. Clearly they're not going to go to discovery, right? If you were going to go to discovery, you would have just published pictures a long time ago and put an end to all the rumors, right? Because then you're going to have to give me proof of this 30-year period where you just kind of.
So you're not going to try to have the case dismissed?
I certainly do not want to have the case dismissed.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I've never
so
heard
we're
that
having
before.
these
Guys, I
discussions.
just want to linger on this for a moment, having been around a lot of lawsuits. I've never heard anybody sued, particularly they're spending a lot of money on this because Tom Clare and his wife have big expenses and I think they charge a lot. I've never heard anybody say, I don't want a well-funded case against me to be dismissed.
It's how I feel, and the reason that I feel that way truly, Tucker, is because
You're
this
being
is
serious.
so much bigger.
Yeah.
We're having those discussions. We've spoken to the lawyer. We want it moved to Tennessee. They filed in Delaware. What's happening here is so much bigger and so much more important for the world.
Delaware, really?
Yeah, which is interesting. Hunter kind of notoriously said, like, we control the courts in Delaware. But
But
this
Fox
is,
News found out absurd case against Fox News by Dominion. I was not named in it. I got sucked into it. But Tom Clare was involved in that case, and it was in Delaware, and they just had a completely compliant judge. It was just a joke,
Yeah.
actually.
well, so that's very interesting because they did file in Delaware, and it is a place where we know that the courts are corrupt. But this would be a kind of precedent that would be, I think, almost easy for Delaware. You're talking about a sitting president of another country coming in and saying, I'm going to sue you for telling the truth. We have truth on our side, right? We actually have truth. So unless he's going to say, blah, 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 I'm not looking at anything, and you're going to get no discovery, and we're just going to award this person. I mean, you've got to give the other side discovery, right?
How does Macron collect, as a foreign head of state, how does he collect?
There is nothing that we can look at. We are pioneering this, obviously, because this has never happened in the history of the world that a sitting president of a foreign country has sued a journalist and a podcaster in another country. It's never happened. So we don't know. I didn't even know how we could sue. Actually, I thought that you could only sue in a. I just am learning with everybody else.
It's amazing
how this is going to work. And speaking of Tom Clare and Dominion, as he was sitting up there giddy with Jake Tapper as these representatives of like the state, because that's what they represent. They represent the state and
Of course,
state
well,
othering.
they always represent
Yeah.
the state,
But they're
right?
giddy talking about Dominion. Because Jake Tapper sits to him, he's like, and how much did you get from Dominion lawsuit? It's a lot of money. You're going to sue her for all that money. And that tells you who their master is, right?
Oh, I think we
Yeah,
do.
these people are satanic, right? That you can't beat me in the arena of truth and facts. So what do you do next? Well, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to destroy your livelihood. You're going to have nothing to your name. And that's why I say this case matters so much more to me, because we can't have this sort of behavior coming from people that are governing us, right? That say, even if you find the truth, even if I am a pervert, even if I got away with sleeping with my student, even though his parents try to take him away, there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm going to impoverish you for even telling people. But that's what this lawsuit is. I'm going to impoverish you for telling the truth. And they're happy. You got to see, they're like, he's like giddy discussing it. And then he turns to the camera, Jake Tapper, and goes, Fox News did this. And how much money did you get? Like, it's totally bizarre. I'm like, that's your master. And you're going to come up against, a hard rock here. I don't care about money. If I hope the story of Candace Owens over the last 2 years, people have come to understand that money is not my master.
I think that's very obvious to everyone. What's interesting, though, since I know everybody you're talking about, is you're the happiest person by far. And I don't mean to be like fake pious or whatever, like the good guys win in the end, but it is true that you can tell who's speaking truth by who is calm and happy. It is true.
Yeah.
Lying makes you afraid, brittle, angry. It does. I've lied. It makes me afraid, brittle, and angry. And the more you tell the truth, the calmer you are.
Right.
I just think that's real. And anyway, I don't think in the end you win siding with the state against the truth teller.
No, and that's why I asked that question. Like, Tom, I know you've watched every minute of the series. You know that they are surrounded by these people. You know about the children victims that have been silenced. Is it really worth it?
You said that to him?
Yeah, on my
What did he
podcast. I just said I had to openly, as we went through this Manouche affair and this woman ending up dead because they fought to like get this pedophile and creature in Amiens released. I just asked him, like, is it really worth it? Like, because for me, I couldn't look at a case that involved the abuse of children or a network of people who are involved with the abuse of children, who have admitted to abusing children, who are defending people who have admitted to abusing children, and put my head on the pillow at night. And that's what matters most. In everything that I do, I have to be able to put my head on a pillow at night and say, I feel like I did what I thought was the right thing to do, and it was a good thing to do.
Yes.
And most people are not guided by that. They're guided by this master of money, right? And they're willing to do these sorts of things to look the other way because you're going to cash a check. Like you and Lydia are going to cash a check. I'm like, that's going to be good. Do you want that to be your legacy? I ask him that genuinely. Like, I hope that we do get to court and I get to ask him that face to face. Maybe he's deposing me and I get to ask him, like, is the worth it? I just want to know. I need to know that because I could never, when it comes to children, I will breathe fire on Tom Clare before I would sign up to knowingly aid people who have harmed children.
Having sat in a long deposition with Tom Clare, I can tell you, the game is to make you mad. And that's very easy with me because I'm a hothead. It probably won't work with you. I have way more emotional control than I do. But I do think, I don't want to be mean, but I just want to say when people have in mind,
you were made to commune. You were made to tell you when crisis dropped back to earth.
mind when Shakespeare wrote about lawyers. I'm like, ooh, that's a little harsh. Kill all the lawyers. What are you doing? He had Tom Clare in mind. He really is a discredit to the profession. I can say
or
that.
credit to the profession, or credit.
If
Maybe
I was legit, I mean,
is-
the godfathers of my children are lawyers,
Yeah.
you know, and really good. My college roommates, really good guys, great guys, men of integrity, true integrity with wives who respect the kids who love them, and just good men. But if I was a lawyer, if I was one of them, and Tom Clare is stalking the earth, I'd be like, man, we got to disbar that guy because he discredits the entire profession.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I don't know what is guiding him at this point, but it is
we don't.
definitively not goodness, right?
It's definitely not.
Does he think he can win? I know he doesn't, because like I said, I got advice from their law firm not to pursue a defamation claim. So you're in this, what, to help bolster their idea to the world that they haven't done anything, when you know that they're lying, when you know that your client is lying and you still represent them. I don't have to put their head on the pillow at night. And what's interesting about me, and he'll just come up against a rock, is I have nothing to hide. Right? If I had anything to hide, you guys would have found out last year, right? That where I went through and physically felt like an X-ray from the press as they tried to destroy everything that I had, everything that I held dear. I mean, it was nonstop. I mean, banned from Australia, demanding that my speaking events get canceled because I'm an anti-Semite, fired in front of the world. I mean, last year was really one for the books, and anything that they could find on me, they wrote articles about, and they smeared me and they libeled me. And the idea was to kill me. It was like, lay it dead. This girl should no longer have a career. And I survived it. And I survived it because I had the one thing that they couldn't quite kill, which is truth on my side. I told the truth. Okay. So at the end of the day, it takes so much more energy and persistence to lie. You have to lie repeatedly. You have to keep telling the person
It's true.
that the shadows on the wall are real. And when you tell the truth, you always have to say it once. And
it hangs in the air and it resonates and people can feel that it's real.
And so they were unsuccessful in trying to destroy me, to try to destroy everything I've ever worked for in my entire life with smears and libels and lies. And so what's left? What is he going to say to me? Like, what are you saying to me during a deposition? Yeah, I think that's a man. And I think that everyone around them is way too close to pedophilia. And I think, Tom Clare, that you should be ashamed of yourself, and any person that would ever launch a defense knowing that children were hurt in the process. I think, you better hope karma's not real.
Have you ever talked to Macron? He texts people, I happen to know.
I wish he would text me. I'd love to speak to him. I view him as a victim, by the way. Okay. You are a child, and your drama teacher, whatever, is macking on you, and you're 14 years old. I don't know what Macron has lived through, but when you get into his backstory, it's very weird as well. It's a very weird backstory, a lot of holes in the backstory. And he is, to me, like a Zelensky. He's totally powerless. There's somebody in the shadows telling him what to do. One of the more fun things learning about Macron is the press sold him as this like savant, like he's just so brilliant and he's ahead of his time. He needed to sell this like creepy relationship, the 14-year-old's ahead of his time. And
he was a man
came across
at 14.
like a 60-year-old. I don't know what we're doing, right? That's weird. But what was really funny was that he then starts to work for Rothschild's bank. And before he went to Rothschild's bank, he went to this school. I don't know how to give you like a tit for tat with America. Let's just call it like he kind of pursued his master's. And nobody knew how he got into the school. He actually didn't get into the school twice. And then he gets into the school and they take this test and he graduates. He passes with flying colors to the top of the class. And the class revolted because they all knew he was dumb. And they knew that there was a fix in for Macron. And so they just canceled test scores that year. So the first time in the school's history, because the kids were suddenly going, there's no way this person got this grade. Same thing happens when he goes to Rothschild Bank. They said, and this is again, according to a Wall Street Journal book, I only use mainstream sources, that everyone who worked with him said he was an absolute idiot. They had no idea why he was at this bank, except for the fact that David Rothschild's hand was on him. Like they basically, like he was allowed to be in these rooms. He didn't even know what IBIDA stood for, but he worked for Rothschild Bank. And they said that it was just very clear that the hand of Rothschild was on him. And so they would all just remark to themselves, like, how are we working with this guy who's an absolute idiot? So even the idea of Macron being this like sophisticated, brilliant banker who was ahead of his time is just not real. If the mainstream media sources are to be believed. Again, this was a book that was done by the Wall Street Journal, and they sourced people that worked with him and said that he was an absolute idiot, which mirrored exactly what the people who went to school with him said when they had to cancel test scores because of his fake scores.
What's the relationship between Macron and Justin Trudeau? They just remind me of each other. They seem like they're from the same factory line assembly, World Economic Forum.
Macron is very clearly a homosexual. I think that's very obvious. People have come out and talked about sleeping with him, and he's never sued them for anything. Very weird.
Really?
Oh yeah, right when he became president, there was and I'm blanking on his name. He came out and spoke and said, "There's this guy is watch out for Macron. He's got some issues." Like he said that he was a part of a sex party with him. Macron never disputed it, and since he likes to sue for defamation, that would have been a pretty good one to go after if a guy is saying he slept with you and that you have mental issues, like that he's like almost like a masochist in many ways. But if you just kind of look at the world right now, a lot of theater boys are getting power. Zelensky was an actor and a performer, and he actually played the role of being the president and then actually became the president. Macron, he was a theater boy, okay? And now all of a sudden he's like playing the part of the president of France. I don't take any of these people seriously. Like this is
as people.
This is your next act. Yeah, you are told to pretend that you're the president of France and somebody behind you is telling you what to do. And we can definitely, as Americans, I think we can all agree, whether you're left or right, that is a circumstance after having Biden in office, because we know, irrespective of whether you loved him or hated him, he was not cognitively there,
right.
And yet the government still ran, and that should terrify you. Who was in control
exactly
while he was on a steep cognitive decline. It's the same for, I think, the entire Western world, that these people are not in real control, and that they're just made to kind of delude the public into believing that, like, yeah, this is a republic and a democracy, and you have a say, you elected this person, but somebody else is obviously pulling the strings.
That's a fascinating observation that has never occurred to me, that the theater kids have taken, like,
literal theater kids.
That's just,
here's your next role. You're going to be president.
So speaking of theater, I just hesitate even to ask this, but because it just opens up all this stuff I don't want to deal with. But you just interviewed Nick Fuentes, or had a conversation with him. What did you think of that? What do you think of him?
I mean, I can tell you my experience was entirely fraudulent with him. I never interview people as a gotcha interview. It's always just that he was making the rounds. He's been around for a while, and kind of his story, when I learned it, because he was banned from everywhere, so I didn't actually know what the backstory was with Nick Fuentes, but then I learned it when he was allowed back on X, and Jeremy Boring, who was then the CEO of Daily Wire, did this X live with him. And
Jeremy Boring did an event with Nick Fuentes.
It was weird. Everything was weird about what happened, but it happened. And Nick told his story, and I was listening in, and said essentially that he was canceled because he started asking questions about Israel. He was 18 years old, and he alleged that it was, very much the fault of the Daily Wire, or whatever he said. And I found it very interesting. And I was like, oh, I actually didn't know this was the backstory. Maybe this really is a person who had, just ahead of everybody else, was questioning Israel and had like a bad hand given to him. So I had him on the show, welcomed him into my home, and he was very nice. We told him, we're going to cut a controversial trailer. We're going to show you like these clips of you talking trash about me, and you can talk about whatever you want for as long as you want, ask any questions you want to ask. It went great. He left. He said, thanks. We can now be friends. And I am not kidding. We published this 11 days later, and I don't even know how to, he just starts screaming, calling me an effing bitch, who set him up. We didn't edit a single thing. Those 11 days, like 2 weeks before we even published the interview, we told him if there's anything that he wanted us to insert. Like, nobody does that if you go on their show.
Yes.
And I genuinely don't know what triggered him, other than me at the very end asking him about, like, or talking to him about family. And it was just the rage that was coming out of him was just weird. And I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he did a 180. You had access to me. You could have said anything after. even if he had said in good faith, I thought I sounded a little weird here. Could you cut it out? We probably would have cut it out because I just don't want people to ever not have a good experience
I
coming on the
understand
show.
that.
You know what I'm
And
saying?
also, you want people. Well, this I'll speak for myself. When I invite someone on, especially just to hear their views, I want them to be able to express what they actually think.
Right. Exactly.
And you decide what you think, and you decide how to express it. I mean, that's like a basic human right, kind of.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not here to trip you up into saying something you don't mean. I want to hear what you do mean.
Yeah. Exactly.
So-
and he told the story. He did all of that, and apparently then, and I don't know if it was driven by insecurity. He didn't know how his followers would take the interview, but he just did a complete 180, lied to his audience, pretended that he was surprised he was behind a paywall. We spoke about him.
Almost 2 billion kilograms.
I mean, it's a total 180 flip. So I can now say that I didn't listen to other people say that Nick was a bad person. I didn't care about what happened when he was 18, 19, 20, 26. I sat across from a person, had a conversation with him. He behaved one way in person and then put on a show for the internet. So I actually can say my experience with Nick Fuentes is that he's a terrible person and a terrible human. Why would you do that? There's no reason to do that.
I agree.
You could have come back onto the show. You could have had beginning of us discussing various topics. I think in many ways, whatever happened to him was when he was 18 may have stunted his growth, meaning that he now is responding to the internet, which is filled with people that don't even use their real names. Right? So really, truly, what the irony of it all is you could just be like the IDF soldiers, just pretending to be his supporters, just getting him to say whatever you want because he's going to do whatever you say. But it was strange. It was totally strange. It made no sense. And
Does
I
he
just
have a family
chapter
or a normal life?
I asked him about that. He said, yeah, it comes from a 2-parent household. That's what he told me.
No. Does he have his own family? Does he?
No, he's not married. And I just offered to him, I was like, yeah, no, I think these are things that you learn when you're married. And he just was vicious about it. And,
About
women don't tell me what to do or whatever it was. And it was very performative. Like I said the exact same thing to Andrew Tate months earlier. I had him and I said, you should get married. Here's why. And of course, he did not react like that. He told me what his hangups were about marriage. It was just part of two people communicating on a show. But for whatever reason, like he saw this as like an attack, even though, yeah, it was weird. It was
That's
totally
a
weird.
tender spot. Well, okay. Has it occurred to you that, and I just want to say, I haven't watched a lot of Nick Fuentes in my life at all.